Howdy folks, Tex Grebner here with Tex Grebner Outdoors. New videos every week, so if you don't want to miss out on any of your Tex Grebner Outdoors Saturday morning cartoon awesomeness, you better make sure that you click subscribe, check that notification box, and check my channel every week for brand new adventures. I love reading your comments, and I really do appreciate all of you that watch. I need to catch you up on what's been going down in the deer woods, because it is still Illinois Archery season 2017. As you can see, it's getting mighty cold out. Days are getting mighty short, and quite honestly, this was a short week that I didn't have much time for hunting, but I think you guys may be pretty excited about the footage that I'm going to bring you this week, because it is dangerous to release too much of my awesomeness all at once. The moon had risen red the night before, and there was rain in the forecast, and it had started to rain about midnight. Trust me, I was awake, because very rarely do I sleep well before a morning hunt. And sitting in the phantasmagoria of the darkness, I plotted how this hunt might go. Because when we go into the woods as hunters, it is always a brand new adventure. Now you see, I was set up at the point of a cornfield where the deer might funnel down. I was set up in what I believed to be a really good spot, because there was an antique tree stand hanging just above me. Now I was set up about 3 feet off the ground behind a multiflora rose patch that had grown up through a wood pile that was made when they cleared the field. There were oak trees behind me, and I had good cover to the front of me. The wind was in my face, and there was a chilly fog hanging in the air. Everything was so utterly, absolutely perfect. It was the kind of November morning that all Midwestern whitetail hunters dream about. I caught a glimpse of white across the cornfield, and it was the antlers of a mature buck. He had come in from the opposite direction that I had expected them to come from. I had expected them to be coming from behind me down into the field rather than in front of me. But luckily, the wind was absolutely perfect. And I realized at this point that as the buck made his way around the field, that there was a small button buck that was trailing a doe. And I got my bow at the ready, even though I knew that the likelihood of this working out was almost nothing, because whitetail are wild and free, majestic creatures, and there's nothing that says that they have to do what you want. Of all the possible paths that they could take, the likelihood of them taking the one that I wanted to and giving me the shot that I was looking for was very small. And when I realized that this just might happen, my heart began to hammer in my ears. I was so utterly excited, because I saw that this was definitely rutting activity, as these two bucks, a young buck and a mature buck, were trailing this doe, and she seemed to be leading them right where I wanted them to be. And so with my heart hammering in my ears, standing and ready for action, I forced myself to calm my nerves and calm my heart. Very excited, filled with primal emotion, because this simply can't be happening. There's no way that this doe is going to lead this buck right around the field, right in front of me, within 15 yards. And I could not believe my eyes when it began to transpire exactly as I had thought that it would. But with hunting, you never really know what may happen. And while I was excited at the prospect of being able to take this buck, the fact is that there is as much an element of wildlife photography as there is the actual act of hunting the animal. The wind was still in my face, and the deer were completely unaware of my presence. The doe in the front was getting very close, but all I needed was for the buck to step into view. But I had not counted on him stopping where he did, as the doe continued to walk. But the wind was in my face, and it was at this point that I realized that my camera on my bow had not had the memory card seated properly. And so I was caught like Wile E. Coyote when he falls off a cliff and realizes there's nothing but thin air beneath him, that while I tried to move my camera back, the buck looked right at me. Wasn't quite sure what I was, but my movement had spooked the doe, and she gave her alarm, and they had taken off across the field. But regardless of the fact of whether or not I did not get the shot, the fact was in my mind that I was so utterly fulfilled. For once I had been in the right place at the right time, and everything had gone according to plan until I had swung my camera arm too far and did not have a backup camera on my bow. But everything had been so perfect that that doe had gotten within 5 yards of me before she spooked at my movement of trying to swing my camera back. The buck had caught me with my hand on my camera arm rather than on my bowstring. And with no backup camera, it put me in a very precarious position. But I hunt for thrill of the chase. I'll just tell you right now, this hunt was a complete bust, because by the time that I was done working and got toward the woods, I met 5 deer on my way into the cornfield, and so there was nothing to be had. But the wind was going to be in my face in this spot, so I figured, well, maybe a buck might chase a doe down the hillside to me. Now, it had been several days since I'd been able to be in the woods, because I'd been working really hard to try and make enough money to get some more production upgrades to bring you guys more awesome, high-quality content. And, of course, for those of you that want to bitch and moan about me busting that buck the other day because I was screwing with my cameras and not shooting the buck because he wasn't on camera. First of all, the camera is God. If it ain't on camera, it didn't happen. Now, while I'm at it, if I didn't film my hunts, you guys would not be able to tell me what a terrible whitetail hunter I am. So this hunt came to a close after a very rough start and only about an hour's worth of daylight, but at least I was able to get into the woods. I didn't really expect lightning to strike twice, seeing as I had overslept, and it was just sunrise by the time that I got to my spot and got set up, and I'd pushed 3 does down the field ahead of me. Almost never do I ever get to hunt under ideal circumstances, because that's just not the way that my life works. But it was an absolutely beautiful November morning, the kind of November morning that all Midwestern whitetail hunters dream about, with the rut in full swing, the wind in my face, deer in the fields, and it was just above freezing. I watched several does on the opposite side of the gully that I was set up along, waiting, listening, and enduring the cold. And then movement caught my eye. A small buck had entered from the pasture side and began feeding in the cornfield. It always amazes me just how graceful the white-tailed deer is. Now, it was a small fork-horned buck, nothing terribly impressive, but I admit I got mighty excited when I saw that he was coming my way. So I got myself into position. The wind was in my face and everything was perfect, and on the other side of the gully there were several deer. But right now my attention was all focused upon the fork-horned buck. Again, nothing impressive, but you can't eat the horns, and so they say that anything with a recurve is a trophy, as long as it's legal. Now, the tree and the multiflora rose shield me from view, and my heart was somewhat in my ears, but I knew that it was time to calm myself for action. There was one problem. Even though this young buck was within range and was clearly distracted, he simply was behind too much brush for me to feel good about taking the shot. And then he looked across the gully and he saw all those does. He was so close to me, but I could not get a shot no matter how hard I tried to get a proper angle on him. You see, whitetail are wild and free, majestic creatures, and there's no really knowing what they're going to do, and there's no really making them do anything other than what they want to do. But I had been so very close to another whitetail. The wind held in my face, and I was hopeful for a change because there were deer literally everywhere, and all it would have taken was for that buck to give me a broadside shot like he did, but for him to have taken 2 more steps for me to draw and fire an arrow with a perfectly clear shooting lane. I had honestly lost count of the amount of deer that were in the field across the gully. There were bucks chasing does, and then there were does that were not yet in estrus. Everything had such a beautiful orangish hue to it as the sun climbed higher and higher. My hands had gotten very cold while I was waiting on the buck. You see, I had honestly forgotten my winter gloves in my Jeep because I was running late on getting into the woods. And just as I was feeling sorry for myself that all the deer seemed to be out of range, here came a doe that had been pushed out of the other field by the bucks. She moved in front of me. I was tense as a coiled spring, but I could not draw my bow because she was looking in my direction, and so I had to wait until she was distracted. The multiflora rose had shielded me, but yet she just kept walking and was almost to the same spot that the buck had stopped, when without any warning at all, the wind hit the back of my neck, and it was over in the flash of a white-tail. While I would have happily taken the fork-horned buck as a gift from the gods of the hunt, I admit that I'm somewhat relieved that he didn't give me the shot, and I can watch him grow into a bigger buck, watching, waiting, listening, and enjoying the merry chase and the visceral mystery of the hunt, because things had almost gone completely right. So I had a real good morning out in the woods. But by the time that I got done working on the farm, I knew that they'd already be out in the field tonight. So I figured that I would be better off coming home, doing some shooting to make sure that I'm ready for that moment of truth. Because we're all badasses in our own backyard. But when it comes down to it, in that moment of truth, when you've got a living, breathing creature there that you're going to try and kill as cleanly as possible, everything changes. And I'm pretty alright in my own backyard at 20 yards. But the rut is well and truly on now. It's getting cold, the days are getting short, there may be some snow in the forecast, and also, good news, I'm going to be upgrading my production once again with another Canon G40 camera. So that's going to be a huge chunk out of my wallet. But I really appreciate all of you guys that watch, and I want to bring you guys the best content that I possibly can. As always, God bless all my sportsmen of America. Join the NRA to protect your rights. Please check out my friends over at SOETacticalGear.com. Thank you very much to those of you involved in law enforcement and those of you serving in the military. Thanks for watching Tex Grebner Outdoors.